We have our featured guest, DeeDee Vaughters, running for state senate. About to make a pretty safe. DeeDee, you want to go up?
Well, I certainly can, and I'm going to ask you guys if you mind if I sit here, only because two reasons. Number one, I'm not as young as I thought I was, and I did a toe touch on a trampoline this weekend and pulled a hamstring, so I'm supposed to be off my feet as much as possible. And so if I could sit, that would be great, but I'll be happy to sit in the middle too if that makes anyone feel better. The second reason is my friend Harry Kibler told me that he likes his politicians to be seated so that they aren't standing up, luring over and looking at everyone and thinking that they're better than anyone else. So he said, I like my politicians.
That's why we have them all sit on the floor.
I'll be happy to sit on the floor if you like. Indian style may not work.
Harry,
but,
I disagree with you on that.
So he said he had Bobby Harold come up and address Rhino Hunt. He made Bobby sit down. So I thought, that's not such a bad thing, because politicians really do need to remember where they came from. And when you put them up on a podium, sometimes they start to get a little fat-headed. So I'm going to sit as often as I can. So.
The last time Harry, I talked to him, he said, "Now, Steve, because you're taller than some of the other people, you need to kind of bend down." My knees got tired having been down so long.
But I'll lean in, and what I want to do today, and I thank you for letting me be the featured speaker. If it's okay with you, I'll tell you a little bit about me and my background. It's going to be a long year, so y'all may as well get to know me. I'll give you a couple of things I'm super passionate about, and then I will be happy to answer any questions and take a position statement on the record on anything you want to ask me. So I want it to be real informal. I want you to stop me as you go along, even, when I'm telling you about my background. But I am originally from South Carolina. I was born in a little tiny town called Loris over in Horry County. I think Horry knows where that is. A lot of people just considered it the last place to stop and buy cheap groceries on the way to North Myrtle Beach. But I was born and raised there, and my dad was a butcher. My mom was a secretary in the tobacco market, so I didn't come from a whole lot. Each and every day, the bus would stop at my grandparents' house because my parents were working. I'd get off the bus at the farm, and I spent every summer on the farm. And basically, what I did, as long as you could walk, you were working on the farm. That's just the way it happened. So my very first job was I would have to get in the my grandfather was a tobacco farmer. And I would have to get in the tobacco bins and walk around and pat down the tobacco. I was just the right weight to get it ready for market. And I had yellow feet. I just walked around with yellow feet and I was barefoot. Paid me in silver dollars, which I still have, in a safe deposit box back in Aiken. And that was my first job. When it came time to go to college, there was no money because Dad was a butcher and Mom was a secretary. That's all they could do to make ends meet most of my life. So I went to school on partial scholarship. Thankfully, I'd done pretty well in high school. And financial aid, which I paid back quickly because I hate debt. And I worked as a waitress all the way through college. So still working. Got out at 22 and worked for 8 years in corporate America for Bristol Myers Squibb Pharmaceuticals. I was a sales rep for them. I went on up into management for them and did some time as a corporate trainer in Princeton. Met my husband on the only blind date I've ever been on in my life. It's funny, we were talking about the Clintons earlier. At the end of the blind date, I just couldn't, Talbert and Corey heard this story recently, but I'd had an instance here in Columbia at the Piggly Wiggly on Rosewood, which I don't think is still there anymore. No, it's not. But I had gone in to buy some sour cream and for a recipe I needed, and I was in line behind a woman who had all the stuff up on the counter. She was paying for her dog food she was attempting to with her tax dollars, and the sales clerk told her that she couldn't do that. So she said, "That's fine, my dog will just eat steak." Left me standing in line to go back to the back of the store to get some steak for her dog that I paid for. Anyway, this story wouldn't leave me, so I told it to my date that night. He said he went home and told his roommate, "I'm going to marry that woman. There's no way she could have voted for Bill Clinton." So I just couldn't let it go. 4 months later, we were engaged, and a year after that, we were married. I continued to work for Bristol Myers Squibb, and put him through the remaining part of his residency, where he made a whole $1.13 an hour. And at the end of that, my husband, I should back up and say, got in a lot of trouble. He was always in the principal's office. for talking back during residency. So we are very much the same type of person. We're always getting in trouble for our mouths, and we can't seem to keep our opinions to ourselves. So he had a job offer to go work at MCG, and he said, "Do you think I should take it? You know, it'd be guaranteed income." And I looked at him and I said, "Are you insane? You would be fired within the first 2 years of working for the Medical College of Georgia. There's no way you can do it." Yeah. So anyway, he said, "Well, I can't do it without your help." And I left corporate America and I ran the business end of his practice for the next 7 years. He is a one-doc practice in a land where that doesn't happen anymore. I don't know how much you know about medical care, but usually most people are owned by a hospital or someone else because they just can't make it. I took my business know-how, he took his science mind, and together we built a very successful medical practice in Aiken. And I'm very proud to say that it is a successful medical practice. Obamacare is on the horizon for us. I certainly hope it's repealed, but I don't know. Medicare and Medicaid is just another form of socialized medicine already. In Aiken, that represents about 55% of our population, and we are done with that. We are just done with accepting Medicare and Medicaid. So what I did last year was I branched out. I bought my own business. I own a franchise of 1-800-GOT-JUNK. It's my plan B to Obamacare, and it's our ticket out. So my husband could go and practice concierge medicine, fee for service. That's exactly what he wants to do. So that's the next step in our life. So I've got a proven record of being a good business person, starting businesses and taking risks, and that's what I like to do because that's the American dream. So when you read, to put all that down in a newspaper article and say small business owner, that's a pretty lengthy story. So I just say I'm a small business owner. But now you guys know the history behind that, the success I have for being able to come up with concepts and ideas and do things in a time when people say they can't be done, but they can be. So the day I got active, I've always cared about politics, obviously from the story you heard when I met my husband. I've always voted, I've always watched politics. The day I became a grassroots activist was the day in 2003 I received a county tax bill for the light fixtures in my office. It's called property tax. They like to call it merchant's tax. Okay, so most business owners pay property tax on fixtures, furnishings, and equipment. I had decided on that day that government had lost its freaking mind, and I was done. I became very politically active in Aiken, and then also with small businesses. I am a small business advocate, and started fighting then. Along the way, I met Ashley Landis with the South Carolina Policy Council. She said, "I like your fire, come join us." And I did, and I was on the board for the Policy Council. I'm still currently vice chairman of the South Carolina Policy Council, and I've been fighting grassroots since 2003. I met Talbert along the way when we got involved in some grassroots issues. So that is what drove me into politics, was the fact that I really think our state and our federal government have lost their mind. It is too much. It is too intrusive into our personal lives and into our business lives, and it is time to push back. And so after fighting as a grassroots activist and finding out not too terribly long ago with redistricting that I was going to wind up in Nikki Setzler's district, I said, oh no. Talbert and I had made a pledge a couple of years ago that if our elected officials did not get on board, then we needed to be prepared to run against them or find good people to run against them. And that's how I decided to run against Nikki Setzler. I looked at Nikki's voting record. He is a true fiscal liberal. He is. He might be a social conservative. I don't know. I'm sure he might be a nice guy. I don't know him. But when I look at his voting record, we deserve better in this state. You deserve someone who doesn't live less than 5 miles from the state house and uses your tax dollars to stay in a hotel. That he could walk home. That's not caring about you and me. That's not caring about how our tax dollars are spent. And you deserve someone who does care and who is a true fiscal conservative. 2 things I'm super passionate about, and then, like I said, I promised I will answer any question you have for me after that, but 2 things I'm super passionate about. It's legislation that's not currently out there. It's legislation I plan to author and introduce the first year I'm in office, and I don't care who's mad about it. The first thing is we have got to have financial disclosures at the state level. We have them at the federal level, but we do not at the state level. We know their occupation, and that's it. As you well know, a lot of these folks get elected. they find themselves in committee chairs, and then all of a sudden, now they're consultants for XYZ company, and you don't know about it, and they certainly aren't recusing themselves. That piece is essential to good government. I don't really care to know how much you make. I mean, some people do. I just want to know who's paying you. And then you can start to watch and see how legislation moves forward very quickly or stalls. It's essential. We don't even have it on the city or county level. Once we start to have that.
Well, I will tell you, the city of Cayce, we do have some disclosure.
You do?
Ace
Ace doesn't.
We got all the check registers online, so we can follow
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, you got that,
You have
but
to disclose any source of income on your ethics report.
you not in the state of South Carolina. You don't. You do when you're running for
Yeah,
federal.
you do, yeah.
What about after you're elected?
Yeah.
Every year, you have to file one every year, yeah.
Yeah, I have to.
I know you do at the federal level.
I know you do at the federal
Yeah.
level. I'm pretty sure you
Anybody,
don't at the state
anybody that
level.
holds any office,
Yeah, I'm a
elected
city,
or appointed
I have
in
to-
South Carolina has to file
Do
an
you?
ethics report.
Okay.
And you have to reveal your sources of income.
I'm pretty sure that that's not something. We'll go back and look
Well,
at that on
you
the
should
state
have,
level.
if you've raised $500, you should have already filed one.
Yeah, I filed one. I'm talking about who pays you after the fact. It's not filing. I'm talking about once you're elected with
No, you
your
have to file it
salary.
every year
Yeah, the
while
salary.
you're in office, yeah.
So we'll go back to that. That's one of the things that I know that we don't currently have legislation on. One of the things we're looking at from this at the South Carolina Policy Council. So we'll come back to that. But I definitely have to disclose donations.
No,
I'm
no,
talking
you
about
have to,
paid.
no, you have to
paid.
disclose income, any income.
Disclose all your.
But I think the question is you have to do that as a candidate.
No, you have to do
But
it
but
as an
what
official
but
as well.
if you're elected to office, let's say you were elected
Yeah.
3 terms ago, do you still have to
Yes, you have to
continue?
do it every year, yeah.
Are you
Okay.
finding that they're recusing themselves?
No, you can't recuse yourself. Ethics violation.
It's an ethics violation to recuse yourself?
You're talking about the
Law right now that
Yeah,
says
yeah,
that you
it's
have
your
to
own
recuse
ethics committee.
yourself.
That's
Well,
the
no,
other
actually, there
problem.
is a law that requires that too. But,
Then why is it not being held up?
well, for
Who's
local
enforcing it?
officials, the people that enforce it are the ethics committee.
Because it's not happening in Aiken at all either.
Yeah.
I mean, we've
We
got
need to pass a
people who
law
are,
and people have to follow laws.
that would be good too. So we'll get back to that. The other thing, and I do want to circle back to this, the other thing that I'm very passionate about is the other fund. We have got, everyone knows what the other fund is? Any, no? Okay. Let me back up. I know Talbot does. Yeah, fines and fees. Our current state budget comes in just under $22 billion, the largest in the history of the state. And we hear about our budget cuts, right? The budget's been cut, the budget's been cut. The general fund last year was cut by about $500,000. But there were no true budget cuts when the budget was increased by almost $1 billion. That's because you had about $1 billion increase in a fund called the other fund. So essentially, to explain the state budget, there are 3 separate funds of money. There's the general fund, which is populated for the most part by sales tax and income tax. Okay? Then you have the federal fund, which comes in the form of federal dollars, your tax dollars essentially, back to the state. And that fund is for earmarked projects, such as the interstates, or whatever the federal government has said it has to be earmarked. There's a separate fund called the other fund, and it derives its money from fines and fees, which I'm sorry is just another form of tax. Fines and fees are taxes. And that is where the money comes from. So anyone in here have a driver's license? I've asked this question, or a hunting license, license to carry a concealed weapon, do we go on and on, fishing license? That's where that money comes from. And right now it sits at about $8.2 billion.
Anything associated with courts?
Every time you, court filing fee,
That's 8.2 billion per year, or that's what's in the fund right now?
per year.
That's what they collected this past year. Yeah.
And what they will spend, because they spend every single dollar they get, right? So that's $8.2 billion in the other fund. And there's no spending caps on that, and you don't see up and down votes on that. The general fund, we're talking about roll call voting, general fund does come into play. You have roll call voting, so you can ascertain who's spending your money out of the general fund with the roll call vote now. The other fund, most of the representatives I talk to, senators and representatives, they have no idea. Half of them don't even know the fund exists. or they could be lying to me too, which is totally possible. They don't know the other fund exists, they can't tell you how the money's being spent. I mean, I asked Senator Greg Ryberg, and I said, where is the other fund? Where are those monies going? Do you have any idea? And he said, I don't have a clue, but my guess is pork. A senior senator. And I'm not picking on Greg Ryberg, I'm just talking about how little we know about our true state budget. $8.2 billion, and we don't know where the money's being spent. And it's overseen by six senators, three representatives, three senators oversee the other fund, the other fund oversight committee. Nikki Setzler sits on that committee.
Other fund oversight.
And then they report to, guess who?
They learned accounting from my
Budget
wife.
Control Board. So you have 11 people who are essentially in charge of $8.2 billion and how it's doled out. The other fund needs to cease to exist. We need to roll the money into the general fund, where it is subject to roll call voting, and it's subject to state spending caps. We have a huge budget. We have more money than we need. And I authored a column a few months ago for the Aiken Standard. I just submitted to the state paper on the other fund. I hope it comes out before we go into session. But the other fund, there are no budget cuts. What's happening, what we've been able to track at the South Carolina Policy Council, is a lot of these state agencies will go back to the other fund committee and just ask for the monies that were essentially cut from their state agency. If budgets were cut, we wouldn't have $1 billion more than we had last year. We went from a $21 billion budget to a $22 billion budget, and did any of you get any money back? No. So they spent $1 billion more this year than in 2011 than they spent in 2010.
You're beginning to learn about political accounting. I'm an accountant.
Yeah.
They don't do accounting like everybody else.
No, there's always
They got
plenty
their
of
own
money.
way
You just
of
go to
doing
the other
things.
fund. I now call it the slush fund or petty cash.
Petty cash.
Petty cash.
8.2 billion.
That's $2.5 billion more in petty cash than we have in the general fund to run this state.
I got a tweet from somebody attending they've already started holding budget subcommittee hearings.
Yeah.
Before they actually have the governor's budget, which is what they're supposed to be running on, right? But the tweet said, one agency says they've been able to handle budget cuts by using other funds. This is common and a reason the budget has exploded.
That should be on the front page.
Well, nobody talks about it. Most people don't know about it.
That's right. There
Okay,
you
then
go.
nobody talks about it,
Nobody
and
knows about
it
it.
should be front page. I've been when the Aiken Standard ran my op-ed piece on the other fund, I criticized them outright for not making this front page news. Not necessarily my, but people should be so angry. That's $2.5 billion more than is in the general fund. So the first piece of legislation I'm going to offer is for the other fund to cease to exist, period. And what I'm going to do is anyone, and I promise you this, anyone who opposes me on this, I on my own dollar will go to their Senate districts and I will tell their people that they are not for true transparency in spending. Okay? We
You're not
don't.
going to be very popular in the Senate.
I don't care. The good news about me is I don't want to be anything more than a state senator, and I want to do that for a limited amount of time. Okay? I have a job, I have 3 children, I have a life, and politics is not my career goal. So I don't care who I make angry, because I'm going home. The only people I care about are doing the right things for the people at home, and I mean that sincerely. I'm going back home. I'm not going to D.C. because I couldn't live there. I'm not going to the governor's mansion, not that I think I would get elected, because I don't want to be there. I want to reform state government. I want to make it truly accountable to the people. Roll call voting was only one small piece of it, as you found out today. I want to make it truly accountable, and then I want to go home and live my life, because I have a good one. And I don't need politics to feel better about myself. I really don't. I liked being a grassroots activist. I did. It was fun. I like to make these people angry. You should make them angry. They should be uncomfortable. And so that's what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do it from the inside. I'm going to go in and author the legislation that I think is necessary, and I'm going to hold these people accountable, and I'm going to go tell their constituents if they're not doing the right thing. Before y'all have to read about it and this flurry of, we got to stop this bill. We're going to know as we're talking about it. Listen, I'm talking about this other fund. These guys, blah, 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 are not backing me on this. And so we're gonna have to go ahead, and that's the way, what's my goal as a senator, and I am gonna push for a recusal. I'm gonna author legislation for that. I mean, my understanding from our investigations at the South Carolina Policy Council is whatever is in place where they have to declare is not currently being done. Maybe they do have to declare, maybe they're not doing it as they should, but we're gonna make sure that they are declaring all of their income every time that every year, essentially. Every year, all of their income, again, I don't care the amount, but who's paying you, and why are you not recusing yourself? And I'll call for refusal from the Senate floor when I see a conflict of interest. I'll say, excuse me, shouldn't you be recusing yourself from this vote?
You are not gonna be very popular.
No, I'm not.
What do you think of your chances of beating Mr. Setzer?
Well, I have to tell you this, I hate to waste my time or my money. I do have a life I like, okay? And if I didn't think I could do it, I wouldn't be here. It's going to be a long year, a year I could spend doing a whole lot of other things I enjoy. And not saying that I don't enjoy being here with you guys, but really, I mean, I have a life. You know, I've got books I want to read. I've got Edisto where I'd love to sit on the beach. And I'd love to go build sandcastles with my kids this summer, but I'm going to be politicking. And so if I didn't think I could do it, I wouldn't be here. But I can't do it without the support of the people in the grassroots movement. I'm not going for any endorsements. I've been offered chances for endorsements that I have turned down from elected officials. I'm going for endorsements from the people, really. And I do hope eventually to get the endorsement from the school choice folks, but not till after the primary. I think that will be essential too. So I certainly need money to be able to run. I have some. I don't have $175,000 in disposable income that I'll need to compete with Nikki. But, you know, I do have some money, and I'm putting quite a bit of my own money and I already have into this campaign. But to answer your original question, if it couldn't be done, if I didn't believe in myself and believe in the people and believe it was time for something different than Nikki Setzler, I wouldn't be here. I'd be building sandcastles. So those are the things. Thank you. Hopefully more than just luck. I'm hoping that you guys will work with me on this, and I really mean that. It's getting the name out. You've read here in Talbot brought in the newspaper that Rich Boland, and I like Rich, but Rich is worried that someone from Aiken can't do this. Why? Why can't someone from Aiken do this? Why does it have to be someone from Lexington? You know, this Senate district actually represents 4 counties. It's not just Lexington. So gerrymandered, it's 4 counties. Okay, so
Aiken's fully Yankee.
Okay.
That's a fact.
But it actually has very little of downtown Aiken. It has a lot of Aiken County. So we're talking about a small portion of downtown. I'm inside the district by 4 blocks. 4 blocks. I could walk out into Greg Ryberg's district from my house, and I walk my dog. I'll walk into Greg Ryberg's Senate district. So someone asked me about that. I'm in the bottom tip. Nikki Setzler and Dwayne Nakeen are in the top tip. And so it's everything in between, which is mostly rural. And it can be done. If Nikki can carry Aiken from up here, I don't know why I can't carry West Columbia from down here. So that's what we have to look at. There's no geographic
Let me
advantage.
ask you a question.
Yeah.
How do you feel about limits on the number of years that a state senator or representative can serve? Don't you think that if it was limited to 6 years, for instance, they couldn't go in there and get into all these old buddy schemes and things and build up things like this general fund that's not part of
You're
the...
talking about term limits?
Like 2 terms.
Yeah. How do you,
8 years.
my question, I guess, is how do you feel about term limits on other than the governor and so forth?
Well, I think if we term limit the governor and we term limit the president, I don't know why we don't term
Why
limit
not?
everyone.
Yeah, no, all right, good.
So I would
That's my thought.
support term limits. I think it's essential.
We do that for a reason.
Well, I think it's essential to good government because you then force these guys and girls to go back out there and live with the laws they make.
Right.
And so I think that term limits are essential to good government. It does keep you from building huge war chests.
Toy with that idea a little bit. I like the
We
way
can mention something here. Council's aware of this, and I think Dave may be. When on the city council, I tried to get a resolution passed to change the state constitution to allow term limits for locally elected officials. Currently, you can't do that. It's only at the local level. Well, the state of New York and other states do have term limit option, and that's what I want. What happened over in the city of Columbia
Yeah.
with their city council, that fellow went to jail.
I think it would eliminate a lot of problems.
But term limits at the local level should also be the option. We should be able to do it. Right now, our Constitution will not allow that.
That's right.
And
Change your
Because they
constitution.
vote themselves. I mean, you know, that's the funny thing. They vote themselves raises. They vote themselves
Yeah.
term limits.
These
I mean,
guys get in and they never get out. They spend a whole life in
well,
the
look at the
Senate.
fellow I'm
or in-
running against. I mean, he's been there since I was 8, and I'm 42.
And they
I mean,
built
he's been there 34 years.
They
He's
built-
been part of the problem.
dynasties and you can't touch them.
That's right.
The old
Former,
buddy.
former U.S. Senator McGovern, who ran for president as a Democrat,
Yeah.
when he got out of the political office field, he went back home and went into business, and he went bankrupt.
Yeah.
And he stated that if he had known that all the bills, those business bills that he passed that affected people economically and the small business person would have created the problems that he encountered once he got out of office, which put him in bankruptcy, he never would have voted for him.
Well, and that's the problem you get. You
Yeah.
have a lot of career politicians, or you have a president who's never had a real job. And so they don't even understand what they're passing. I mean, they have no idea, and they don't have to go back out there and live with it. Now, I know Nikki I think he's an attorney in West Columbia, but Nikki Setsley. But, I mean, 34 years, really?
That's a long time, man.
If I'm going to go, I just go big.
Just a quick question on a totally different subject, but,
Yeah.
self-defense carry laws. Would you support a constitutional carry? If you can own it, you can carry it anywhere, anytime?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, most definitely. I'm for your right. I mean, you got to bear arms and to keep that. It's essential. I mean, it's what our forefathers, the rights they gave us. Why are we trying to?
Can I ask you a question completely unrelated?
Absolutely.
You said your husband was a single practice. Dr. Bland's still not going at it down there?
He's over in Lexington. No, Dr. Bland is now owned by the hospital.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
I was just wondering, because my daughter dated Patrick.
Yeah. Jim Bland and Libby, they sold out the hospital 2 years ago.
Oh, they did?
Uh-huh.
Because he was a single practitioner for years and years and years. back
He
down
was, then he went into, it's a funny thing, he went into law, and then he went back
He's
into
a lawyer,
medicine.
too.
You could make a
Yeah.
living.
And our medical office used to be his
there.
law.
Oh, you know Dr. Bland? Yeah, he's a great guy.
Oh, Jim Bland and Libby, I mean, they're fabulous people, but no, he's now owned by the hospital. So, as is Gil Royal. I mean, we're a dinosaur when you look at
Yeah,
single
I
doc
didn't know he
practices
sold
that
out.
we still,
Bland or Bland and Needle?
I don't know if he's.
I don't know, he's got like, oh gosh, he's got 6 kids or something like that.
Well, Libby had a few, and he had a few, and then he and
Yeah,
Libby
they
had
had the-
two together,
Yeah,
and
they had the twins.
they had 6. Yeah.
Patrick and his brother, or the twins, I think.
Yeah, well, Norman was my son's soccer coach.
Okay.
Libby's
That's
son,
right,
Norman.
Norman with the 3 kids?
Three boys. Couldn't remember if it was 3 or 4.
I was just, I didn't know if you knew that, so, because he was, you know, I thought that he practiced, because he's old.
He did. Well, he practiced for a long time as a single doc practice, and my father-in-law is still, his family practice too, still independently owned, but what I'm saying, it's a dinosaur, and when my husband came out of fellowship, people said, you're going into practice for yourself, you just can't do that in this day and age. You either have to get a salary from the hospital, or you gotta go into this mega group, and he's had several offers to go into mega groups, and that's not the type of personality we are. We just couldn't do it. We're independent business people. We like to call our
Play
own.
nice in the sandbox.
Not really. You know, my husband had to go somewhere and ask somebody if he could buy a piece of equipment which he thought was necessary. I mean, I think he'd lose his mind. I mean, that's just my husband's personality. So I knew that, and that's why I was willing to spend the 7 years it took to help him follow his dream. And now he is helping me with my 1-800-GOT-JUMP business to follow mine, to be an independent business owner. And he's very supportive of me in this role, as well as are my in-laws. So they're helping me with our three kids, which are 11, 8, and 4. Like I said, I have a life. I have a very busy life.
What does gut jump do?
She's a jump lady.
I am. I'm the queen of jump. Basically, if you want to get rid of something in your home and you don't have the strong back or the pickup truck to do it, my guys will come in and make it go away for you, whether it works or not. and then we decide the best possible next life for that junk. So we donate to charity, we recycle the appliances that no longer work. That's 1-800-GOT-JUNK.
You said earlier that your practice was 55% Medicare.
Medicare and Medicaid.
Okay, is there a set percentage that you have to accept Medicare and Medicaid?
Not right now, but if they try to, here's my fear, and it may happen, but I'll be pushing back strong against it. If my husband decides to opt out and take no Medicare and no Medicaid, then they may try to revoke his medical license to practice.
You know,
And I will be pushing hard and strong against that. So,
a couple of years ago, I read about a private practitioner, doctor. I don't remember which state he was in, but he quit accepting Medicaid and Medicare. He quit accepting all insurances. He was strictly cash only. He reduced the cost to the patient drastically,
right.
where it was just, like $35 per doctor visit.
That's right.
And the whole city went after him,
Yeah.
and they were trying to force him to raise his fees.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure whatever happened with him. I don't even remember his name or what state he was in, but I remember reading about this a couple of years ago.
Well, here's something that could very well come down the pike, and it might have been West Virginia, because here's a real story in West Virginia. You had a group of 4 doctors that wanted to opt out of all insurance and do what's called concierge practice, okay? But what they decided they were going to do is, because there's a lot of coal miners there, a lot of poor coal miners, they said, well, what we'll do is if you pay us $1,000 up front or whatever, we will then see your entire family for the year for that $1,000. It works as a retainer. Okay, most people, I have a $4,000 deductible, so that would be a deal and a half for me to go get to pay someone $1,000. Blue Cross Blue Shield sued the practice and saying because they were taking the $1,000 up front, they were practicing insurance without a license to practice. They took it all the way to the Supreme Court in West Virginia, and they won. But Blue Cross Blue Shield sued the doctors. I mean, how can you force? We're independent people. How can you force someone to take insurance?
Well,
I mean,
that was a
that
good
happens.
example. Blue Cross and Blue Shield has gotten so big that they dominate the medical industry in the United States.
But how can you force
They-
someone to take insurance?
They can dictate to you doctors, your husband, the independent doctor, they can dictate to you, you either do what we want to do or you starve.
Well, that's essentially, yeah, and that they have done that. And in South Carolina, this is a federal, I won't get to really take a position on this. It's on my website because I feel strongly about it, but this was something for D.C. that we need to be pushing for, is the ability to buy insurance across state lines.
You can't do that in South Carolina.
That's right. And that is wrong. That forces you into basically the conglomerate of Blue Cross Blue Shield. Now, if I can buy my auto insurance from Texas, why can't I buy my health insurance from Texas? Because then what we have now in South Carolina is crony capitalism
And
versus
you find that
capitalism
your
where I
old
can shop my price statewide.
your old buddy politicians like Nikki Seltzer that are in there support these big
Well, they're
corporations like that,
consultants for Blue Cross Blue Shield.
which helps them to continue to dominate.
Yeah.
But
Well, they're consultants for
if
Blue
the
Cross.
politician didn't have but 6 years, I think it would change the whole complete picture.
Yeah.
But I have a question regarding these doctors in West Virginia that would charge a family $1,000 up front. Now, as they brought their children to the doctor throughout the year, the $1,000 would reduce down.
Correct.
That $1,000 didn't buy $10,000 worth of medical treatment. It bought $1,000. So how could that be considered insurance?
That's apparently what the Supreme Court decided, that it wasn't considered insurance, and it worked very much as a retainer fee that an attorney charges.
Yeah, that's what.
And
So they won. West Virginia
Those
doctors
doctors
won.
won.
Okay.
They very much won. And so, but that, I think that's essential. If a doctor wants to practice concierge medicine, or you're like with me, I only carry catastrophic insurance, and I have a $4,000 deductible. I mean, I would come out way ahead just to pay that doctor $1,000 up front. I think that is up to the individual. It's up to the doctor. The other part is we have got to push on our federal guys. We have DC guys. We have got to push for the ability to buy insurance across state lines. We need to push back against Obamacare, yes, but then we need to make it so insurance is affordable, and the only way you can do that is to create a true marketplace of competition. We have no competition in South Carolina. We only have crony capitalism. And that's wrong. So if something comes to the state on that level, I would definitely support it, but I'm working as a grassroots activist. On the other end, with our guys in D.C., I've been talking to Jeff Duncan and Trey Gowdy and all that Mick Mulvaney and talking. I'll continue to be a grassroots activist for things that are going on in D.C. I think that's essential to us back home because we have to basically take the Blue Cross Blue Shield product of whatever they choose to sell it to us for, which is way too expensive.
I agree that the government doesn't know what's going on. One hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. I received a letter yesterday from land management, and this land management thing wanted to know what I was doing with the property I had down in North South Carolina. And they wanted to know if I had chickens, what kind of trees I had on the property, if I had bees, how much money I made per year, all kind of intrusive information that really they don't need to have. And this information they got from somewhere, I don't know where. And then they asked me on the bottom of the questionnaire if I had sold the land, to whom, their address, their phone number, and everything else. In other words, they wanted me to supply information to them if I didn't have the property. But that should be doggone illegal. And the other point that I was going to make is this information came from 7 years ago when I was married. 7 years ago. Still had my wife's name on the paperwork too. From 7 years ago, and now it's showing up from 7 years later. They don't know what's going on.
A couple other things that I've just been asked about, sound money. I can't believe you didn't ask me to go on the record for that. Yes, I would support that bill in the State House. Budget Control Board, I want it to go away. I've written columns about it. The leadership knows I want it to go away, so they'll be fighting me every step of the way as I try and take this away from Nikki Setzer. Because I will definitely be voting for that. That's not legislation I can author. It's already out there. I'll be pushing for that. I am a true capitalist. I'm not a crony capitalist. I am against any and all government spending on economic development and have gone on the record with columns for that several times and fought up at the State House with Talbert against Sembler, against Amazon. Again, I fought against Boeing. I mean, Boeing, $131,000 per job created. That is unbelievable. 1/10 of our general budget spent on Boeing. How many Boeings can we actually afford? And that's when you dial it down and look at it. Boeing was to create 3,100 new jobs, and when you look at the money spent, that is $131,000 per job created. We can't do that. Why don't we build an environment where businesses want to come? We already have it where there's no labor unions. So why don't we then dial back down and get rid of, I'm for fair tax, get rid of all these onerous taxes on businesses and make it where they just want to come here. I ask people this all the time, and people, Bill Gates, big Democrat. Why is Bill Gates in Washington State? Do you know why he's in Washington State?
The weather?
It's where you're born.
No state income tax in Washington State. That's why Bill Gates is in Washington State. So we're in Texas. So we just need to start looking at those, and that's why I'm a big proponent of fair tax. If you want the big businesses to come, you don't have to give them tax incentives. You just have to create an environment where the CEOs would want to be, and part of that too is school choice. We talk about education in the state. I'm a big proponent of school choice. We have to create an environment where the businesses want to come. We don't have to pay them to come.
Let me mention this before we get on that. See you, Paul.
See you later, Paul.
I'm going to work. You mentioned the Amazon issue, and
Yep.
I called a press conference up there, and we had a number of people come. Talbot was there. We had people, Democrats and Republicans there. Frank Knapp was there. But it was a question of fairness. You had $500,000 in rent, taxpayers' money to purchase little land. But why would you treat one business differently from other businesses?
That's hard.
Very good, very good.
Y'all sang it. Hey, that's hard to say. I didn't realize that.
Hey, Eddie.
Well, you know that the United States, the Richmond County, is being affected by adult bookstore.
This is a love song for her.
When you get the Brandon out, get the Steelers folk.
You recognize that? Have I told you lately that I love you?
I do now. That's
I hadn't heard that for a long time. Very good, Mr. Gaines.
Hey, very good.